The collapse of the lost city. Ruins of the Forbidden Temple. 1930. The walls of the temple crumbled into the abyss, dragging with them the last remnants of the cursed civilization. The names of the lost merchants, kings, and smugglers who had once traded their lifetimes for power were now vanishing from history itself. Mei Ling dragged Alderidge through the ruins, dodging falling debris as black tendrils of mist clawed at the collapsing stone. "James, snap out of it!" she shouted. But Alderidge was frozen. His mind was still trapped in the vision the Scarlet Manifest had burned into him. He had seen the truth, the stolen time, the bargains that had shaped history in secret, the eternal debt that was now being collected. He whispered, his voice shaking. "Mei, we were never supposed to know." Mei Ling's grip tightened around his arm. Too late for that. The ancient gates burst open, and from the mist, the risen China Globbers charged forward, their faces half human, half shadow, their bodies flickering between past and present as though they existed in multiple centuries at once. They were no longer men. They were fragments of stolen time, unraveling into the abyss. The war for the Scarlet Years. The cliffs above the temple. Aboard the Leviathan. The Leviathan's cannons roared, unleashing flashes of fire and steel into the raging battle below. The Hollow Circle's forces had landed, their soldiers firing volley after volley at the nightmare emerging from the ruins. Captain Elias Graves stood at the bow, gripping the ship's rail as the storm-racked sea churned beneath them. "Hold the line," he bellowed. The Hollow Circle had spent decades searching for the Scarlet Manifest, believing it would grant them control over the secrets of the China Globbers. But now, they had found only death. From the mist, figures of ancient merchants and lost explorers materialized, their souls shredded by centuries of cursed bargains. They moved through bullets like ghosts, their bodies warping and flickering between different moments in time. "They can't be killed," one soldier screamed. Graves gritted his teeth. "Then we don't kill them." He reached for his final weapon, a vial of red-tinted liquid, glowing faintly in the darkness. It was the last trace of the original bargain, the essence of the first deal ever made between man and the abyss. If he released it, it would undo everything. Every deal. Every stolen second. Time itself would unravel. And the world would never be the same again. The abyss takes its due. Temple Ruins. 1930. Mei Ling and Alderidge burst from the collapsing temple, only to find themselves surrounded. The China Globbers were closing in, their fingers stretching like shadows, reaching toward Alderidge. One of them spoke, its voice an echo across centuries. "You have seen the truth." Alderidge took a step back. "I never wanted this." The ghostly figures loomed closer, their eyes burning with golden fire. "You were never given a choice," the voice replied. Mei Ling raised her pistol, but before she could fire, the air itself split open, a ripple of time tearing through the battlefield. And then, the Leviathan's final weapon detonated. A shock wave rippled across the ruins, pulling the China Globbers backward, their bodies disintegrating into scattered moments of history. The abyss screamed. The ground shook violently, and time itself began to collapse. The fall of the Leviathan. Aboard the Leviathan, 1930. Graves staggered backward as the deck of the Leviathan split apart, the ship caught between two warring timelines. Half of his crew aged into dust in seconds. The other half reverted to their younger selves, their weapons vanishing from existence. The Hollow Circle's last scholar clutched his chest, gasping. The Manifest was the only thing keeping time stable. Graves turned toward the collapsing city. The abyss had claimed the Scarlet Manifest. And now, it was claiming everything else. "We have to abandon ship." The order came too late. With a final thunderous crack, the Leviathan was pulled into the storm, swallowed by the same abyss that had consumed the lost years of history. The price of the bargain. Somewhere beyond time, Alderidge felt himself falling. Not through air. Not through water. Through moments. Flashes of history rushed past him. The building of the Great Wall, the rise of the East India Companies, the burning of forgotten cities. He was seeing everything the China Globbers had taken. And then, silence. A voice spoke from the darkness. "James Alderidge, you have seen what was hidden. The debt has been paid. And yet, history is still broken." Alderidge opened his eyes. He was no longer in the temple ruins. He was standing in the middle of a London street. 1945. The war had ended. But something was wrong. The world had changed. And he was the only one who remembered. The new world without the China Globbers. Mei Ling appeared beside him, gasping for breath. "James, where are we?" Alderidge turned to her, his heart pounding. "Not where," he whispered. "When?" The China Globbers were gone. The Scarlet Manifest was destroyed. But something had filled the void they left behind. And as Alderidge looked around at the new world, he realized. The real secret war had only just begun. China Globbers. The war beyond time. The world had changed. And James Alderidge was the only one who remembered how. A world without the China Globbers. London, 1945. The streets of London were bustling. The war had ended. But something was wrong. James Alderidge stood frozen, his breath shallow as he took in the unfamiliar skyline. Landmarks looked the same, yet not quite right. The people walked with a different rhythm, their clothes just slightly different from what he remembered. "James," Mei Ling said softly, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to face her. She looked just as shaken as he felt. "It worked," she whispered. Alderidge ran a hand through his hair. "No, it didn't." They had destroyed the Scarlet Manifest. They had erased the China Globbers. But if that were true, who had taken their place? The Silent Empire. Alderidge and Mei Ling moved through the city, unnoticed, like ghosts in a world that no longer knew them. The hollow circle's insignia was gone from history. There were no traces of the China Globbers. Their ancient trade routes had never existed. But in their place, a new power had risen. Alderidge saw signs of it everywhere. Tiny details at first. The strange markings on newspapers, the odd insignia stamped on buildings, the way certain people carried themselves, as though they held secrets no one else could see. And then, they saw it. A statue in the heart of London. Carved in impossibly smooth obsidian, it depicted a man with no face, holding a parchment with no writing. Beneath it, the inscription read, "The eternal trade is ours." Alderidge stepped back, his pulse racing. "James," Mei Ling said, voice unsteady. "What does this mean?" Alderidge's mouth went dry. Someone took their place. And then he felt it. A presence. Something watching them. From the rooftops. From the alleys. From beyond time itself. The return of the debt collectors. The abandoned manor. London, 1945. They found shelter in an old manor, a forgotten house on the edge of the city. The place felt untouched, as if history itself had skipped over it. Mei Ling lit a lantern, its warm glow doing little to dispel the unnatural chill in the air. "What do we do now?" she asked. Alderidge was silent, staring at the map they had found. It was old, written in an unknown script, yet it pulsed with a familiar energy. It wasn't the Scarlet Manifest. But it was something like it. A new contract. "This is what replaced them," Alderidge muttered. Mei Ling's eyes widened. "Another bargain?" Alderidge nodded, his fingers tightening around the parchment. The China Globbers were erased. But time doesn't leave gaps. Something had to fill the void. Outside, the wind howled. And then, footsteps echoed through the halls. Mei Ling's hand went to her pistol. Alderidge reached for his knife. The door creaked open. A man stepped inside, cloaked in midnight blue robes, his face hidden behind a mask of shifting shadows. He carried a ledger bound in iron. And when he spoke, his voice was not of this world. "The trade never ends." Alderidge and Mei Ling tensed, their instincts screaming at them to run. But the figure raised a single finger. "You sought to erase the China Globbers." His head tilted, as if amused. "Did you think the debt would simply vanish?" Alderidge clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The man took a step closer, the shadows shifting unnaturally around him. "We are the ones who came before them. We are the ones who come after." His ledger snapped open, revealing names written in blood. Names that should not exist. Names of people who had never lived. And at the very bottom of the list, James Alderidge. The debt that cannot be paid. Alderidge's breath hitched. "That's impossible." The masked figure's lips curled into a smile beneath the shadows. "Nothing is impossible, Alderidge. You have stolen time. You have broken the cycle." He stepped forward, the room growing impossibly cold. "And now, He extended a single black coin toward them. You owe us. Mei Ling fired. The bullet never reached him. The air itself twisted, and the shot vanished, unmade before it ever existed. The figure sighed. Violence will not help you. His gaze locked onto Alderidge. The China Globbers were thieves, yes. But they understood the rules. The trade must continue. Alderidge gritted his teeth. And if we refuse? The masked man chuckled, the sound ancient and terrible. You will not refuse. The ledger must be balanced. He placed the coin on the table, its surface shimmering like liquid night. Consider this our first exchange. And then, he was gone. The room fell silent. Mei Ling grabbed Alderidge's arm. James, what do we do? Alderidge stared at the coin, the weight of centuries of forgotten debts pressing down on him. His hands trembled as he whispered. We didn't end the trade. He looked up, his eyes filled with new horror. We just changed the merchants.